The next super global on our list is the request. So on the right hand side, right above the session, if we click on the request, and it's basically HTTP request variables, which means, if we go to the description, an associative array that by default contains the contents of get, post, and cookie. Basically combines these three requests, the super globals, and puts them into one common array. Now, one important thing to notice about and to know about this request super global is that it only contains the variables, super global variables from these three, which have been set in the correct way. Basically, you cannot assign get the new index to the get, post, or cookie manually right above the request and then hope that it's going to be basically reflected in this array, because it won't. Get will only contain, basically request will only contain gets which are actually set through the URL parameters, then post only the ones which have been posted to it, and cookie only the ones which basically the cookies which are actually stored on the user's machine. If we scroll down a little bit, there is a note here. The variables in request are provided to the script via get, post, and cookie input mechanism, and therefore could be modified by the remote user and cannot be trusted. This is why it only contains the original ones actually submitted through these requests. The presence and order of variables listed in this array is defined according to the PHP variables or the configuration directive. Let's have a look at this configuration directive. So if we open this in a new tab, sets the order of EGPCS, which means environment, get, post, cookie, and server. Variable parsing. For example, if variables order is set to SP, then PHP will create super global server for S, P for post, but not create environment, get, and cookie. Setting this to a blank string means no super globals will be set. We're not going to be covering how you can actually set these things. It's just to show you basically how, in what order they are going to be read. So if, let's say, this is the default order, then obviously when we submit the page with request with the index of, let's say, school in get, and then we submit the same index in post, then obviously first it's going to set get and then override the get request with the post one, because the post one is after this. So obviously index, using the same index, it will override the previous one. And I'm going to show you this, how it works as well. But how can we find out basically the order of this? Let's go back to our editor. And the easiest way is to simply use PHP info as we did before, so we can see actually exactly what our PHP server is configured as. So if we go back to our browser, refresh the page, and now if we look for this directive, I'm just going to copy this, variables underscore order. If I just click Command F to find, and there we go. And this is the precise order on my machine, basically with my installation of PHP as well. EGPCS, which means environment, get, post, cookies, and server. So that's how you can basically find out the order on your own server or your local computer. So I'm just going to remove this PHP info. And now what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to use echo pre. We're going to print see basically what our request contains. So if we go for the request, and then again echo closing pre-tag, and what I'm going to do is create the HTML form, and then we go for the method. I'm going to use post, because what I'm trying to do is basically to put something like get, basically the query string in a URL with the same index as one of the inputs in our form, which will send obviously the request via post. Then input, and it's going to be type text, and the name I'm going to give it time, say, and the value I'm just going to use PHP time function. Then we are going to create input of the type submit, which will allow us to submit this button, value submit. And if we now save everything and preview everything in the browser, we refresh the page, there we go. Obviously the request to start with is empty because no get, no post or cookie has been set. This is the default time, which is automatically generated by a time PHP function. And what I'm going to do is also put the query string with the same index, the same variable basically. So time equals and some time, say here. So what should happen with this array? If I now just hit enter without submitting the form, it will obviously take, the request will take the get request, which is the time index obviously, and then the value is sometime, and that puts it into this request array. But what's going to happen once I submit the form? We know that the get goes before a post in my configuration. So first the get is going to be added to the array, but because this input of the post request also has its name, if I go back to the editor, you may remember, the name of this input is also time. So what it's going to do is it's going to be simply overwrite what's already there. So if I submit this, there we go, you can see time has now been updated to what I've submitted. Obviously the time has now changed as well, because time is basically reflecting the current time when the function has been triggered. But as you can see, it's updated to what was originally in this input field. So overwritten the get request, because post is right after the get, basically, in terms of reading the variables, basically. So that's one of the things. The other thing I wanted to show you, if we go back to our editor, I'm going to remove this form for now. The other thing I wanted to show you is basically that we literally can't override these variables. So let's go for get, and let's put some, let's say, school here, equal, and let's put SSD tutorials. So you might be thinking this will be added to the request, but it won't, as I explained earlier, but just to show you basically that that's how it works. Then we have post, let's say time, and let's use the time function again. Then we are going to add cookie as well. We know that we obviously can't set cookies this way anyway, because we need to use the set cookie function. But as you saw earlier, we could do it this way to just display it from within this cookie super global. But again, we are now interested to see whether it's going to populate the request one. So let's just put the name again. Okay, and let's add to the request, because you can do it this way. So here, if we just add to the request super global, then this will be reflected, but we won't see these three anywhere. So if we go back to the browser, refresh the page, we don't want to resend because we want to actually get rid of this query string here. And there we go. As you can see, it only took year because year was directly assigned to the request super global, but none of the other ones, which we've added manually right before actually printing this request here, have been reflected. Now let's see if we obviously know that let's say I'm going to add time here, some time. This will be reflected because it comes legitimately through the URL, obviously. So that's been populated and added to this request array, but any other ones manually set won't work. So that's pretty much everything about the request super global. Let's move to the next video when we are discussing the server.